All right.
Hello, you're watching Six News on this Tuesday evening. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. It's 7:25pm Australian Eastern Daylight Time. We are now expecting Treasurer Jim Chalmers to hand down his first ever federal budget in just a few minutes in Parliament House in Canberra. Natural disaster relief is on the table, as is relief for cost of living pressures. But there's ongoing debate about a job seeker raise and also Stage 3 tax cuts. We'll bring you analysis on what it means for you. This is Budget 2022 2.0. And a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us here for Budget Night 2022 2.0. It's the second one we've had this year. Have, of course, had Josh Frydenberg earlier this year, a pre-election one. I think it was in March or April. Probably March. And, of course, we're now having Jim Chalmers. It is, of course, Labor's first since 2013, their first federal budget since then. So it's going to be really interesting. We're hearing constant debate about something that's not even coming into effect until 2024, which, as I mentioned, Stage 3 tax cuts. We're going to begin now with political editor Roman McKinnon, who will be with us all night. And you'll see in a moment the House of Representatives standby slide as we wait for the Parliament feed to pick up. But, Roman, good evening to you. What are we expecting in this budget from Jim Chalmers?
Good evening, Leo. Well, this will be Jim Chalmers' first budget as the government's treasurer. Of course, this is the second budget of the year. The first one was handed down by the coalition, the treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. What we can expect, it'll be sort of like a mini budget. So that'll help fulfill Labor's election promises and ease those cost of living pressures, because backdrop by that there's cost of living pressures, as I mentioned. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said that this budget will help families and aged care residents the most. And he also said that it'll be quite straight to the point to help those cost of living pressures and those economic issues at the moment. So there won't be very many cash handouts or anything like that, just to really impact those cost of livings, like those pressures, really.
Yeah, also with us tonight is Six News contributor, host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill, and the writer of Commonwealth Knowledge. He does a lot here at Six News, Stuart Jeffrey. He's also in Queensland for us. Stuart, good evening to you. What are you expecting personally from this budget? Because obviously, as Roman discussed there, cost of living is just a huge issue right now, but it is not the only debate when it comes to what people want to see from the government right now.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. It's definitely the biggest issue is going to be cost of living. Currently, the inflation is, I believe, $1.6 trillion. And of course, Jim Chalmers has already recognised that he is constrained by the current inflation and other issues. So I reckon that'll be probably the most important thing here. As you mentioned, the Stage 3 tax cuts are probably what everyone's looking to see. But I'm looking also to see about anything coming in for lower income earners as well.
You are now seeing the Parliament feed pick up right now as we prepare for the Treasurer to come out. I'll go back to Roman in a second, because Roman, as I mentioned in the intro, Stage 3 tax cuts are a huge issue right now. They're not coming into effect until 2024, and the government's repeatedly said they're not dumping it. Do you think this is an issue that'll go away for them anytime soon? Because it's, again, 2 years until it comes into effect. It seems like it's just an issue that's going to drag on and on.
Yeah. It's quite hard. I feel like it has been lingering around quite a bit, sort of into this budget. Maybe there might be a bit of closure after tonight. Whether it might still hang around, it's quite unsure what will happen. But yeah, as you mentioned, another 2 years away. So may find out tonight. Yeah, it might keep going or stop tonight.
It's a real wait-and-see situation, and of course also people want a job seek increase. Government's repeatedly said they're not going to bring that in. I'll ask this to Stuart. Stuart, do you think they're ever going to change their position on that, at least anytime soon, regarding that job seeker increase? Because they just keep saying, no, we're going to have it, not going to have it, we'll consider it in future budgets, but there's also a bunch of old tweets where you just see them constantly calling for a job seeker increase.
Look, yeah, as you said, it's definitely something that they've promised in the past, but I'm honestly not expecting that to be pushed at this point in time. Potentially the next budget, but definitely not this time, I don't think.
Yeah, and you're hearing some of that noise from the House of Representatives coming in. But again, we are still waiting for Jim Chalmers. Should be any minute now. We just hit 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Of course, we should remind you that we will have special coverage right after this post-budget analysis of what this budget means for you. That'll be straight after Jim Chalmers' speech right here on 6 News. So stay with us, but we will bring you that full speech when it comes in just a moment. Now, Roman, I've spoken to Jim Chalmers twice during interviews. I think one was actually before the 2021 budget when he was Shadow Treasurer. Do you think it's pretty hard to put yourselves in his shoes, but you think he might be a bit nervous? I mean, not only is it a big speech of him as the new Treasurer, but of course it is, as we mentioned, Labor's first ever federal budget since 2013. It's almost been a whole decade since they've delivered one.
I think for sure he'll be very nervous, but I think he might be confident at the same time that he's done what he can to do this. He's probably practiced his budget speech a few times. Obviously, his first budget handing down as a treasurer, but also, as you mentioned, for the Labor government to put their foot forward as their first budget and not get rid of, but fulfill all those election promises that they made earlier during the year.
Yeah, again, you're seeing more action coming in there from Parliament House. We don't control the camera, so any weird camera issues, I fully blame on the Parliament House team, with all respect to them. But we are seeing, it looks like the Speaker coming there. That's Milton Dick, who is the Speaker. The Greens have just released a statement, might I add, which is really interesting. The government's saying, the Greens, I should say, saying, and I'll cut to the budget in a second, that the October budget does not deliver the change that millions of Australians voted for at the last election. That is the Greens. We'll have more of their statement in a second, but we want to listen in now to what is being said in Parliament right now. We have Speaker Milton Dick, and we're heading to Jim Chalmers' first ever budget. Stay with us. You're watching 6 News Budget Analysis. Straight after this is Jim Chalmers.
I present the Appropriation Bill number 1, 2022-23 and the explanatory memorandum.
I'm going to call the clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to appropriate money out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the ordinary annual services of the government and for related purposes.
I give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that the bill be now read a second time. Speaker, from the Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands of Canberra to the Yuggera and Yugambeh lands of Logan and right around Australia, we acknowledge country and we commit to a voice for First Nations people. Yeah. Speaker, this is a responsible budget that is right for the times and readies us for the future. It delivers on the priorities of the Australian people and it repays their faith in a new government. Through a devastating pandemic, through a succession of dangerous and damaging natural disasters, through global uncertainty and painful price rises, Australians have demonstrated the best of our national character. Resolute and resilient in hard times, practical and pragmatic about the challenges we confront, optimistic and confident in a better future, and ready to work together to build it. In this same spirit, our Labor government's first budget does 3 things. It provides cost of living relief, which is responsible, not reckless, to make life easier for Australians without adding to inflation. It targets investments in a stronger, more resilient, more modern economy, and it begins the hard yards of budget repair. It recognises that our best defence against uncertainty around the world is responsible economic management here at home. Speaker, we now confront the prospect of a third global downturn in a decade and a half. This time not a financial crisis or a pandemic, but a war driving high prices and higher interest rates here and around the world, and the risk of another global recession. And this time demands a different response, one that puts a premium on what's responsible, affordable and sustainable. That's why this budget pays for what's important, strengthens our buffers against adversity and begins to build a better future. It delivers on our commitments: cheaper childcare and more paid parental leave, better access to healthcare, cheaper medicines and a better standard of aged care, fee-free TAFE and more university places, cheaper and cleaner energy, more affordable housing and a future made in Australia. Speaker, this is a solid and sensible budget suited to the conditions. Australians know that this is a time of great challenge and change. The global economy teeters again on the edge, with a war that isn't ending, a global energy crisis that is escalating, inflationary pressures persisting, and economies slowing, some of them already in reverse. All of this is now reflected in the updated forecast for global growth, downgraded since the March budget for this year, next year and the following year. Now, in this uncertain environment, we are pleased and proud that Australia has plenty going for us, including low unemployment and good prices for our exports. But while we intend to avoid the worst of the turbulence from overseas, we can't escape it completely. Global challenges, along with high inflation and higher interest rates, will have an impact. Our economy is expected to grow solidly this financial year by 3.25%, before slowing to 1.5% growth for 2023-24, a full percentage point lower than what was forecast in March. The hit to growth will have an effect on employment, but jobs will continue to be created and unemployment is expected to stay low by historical standards at 4.5% in 23-24 and 24-25. Inflation is expected to peak at 7.75% later this year, before moderating over time to 3.5% through 23-24 and returning to the Reserve Bank's target range in 24-25. Wages are growing faster now than they were before the election, but that welcome news is tempered by rising electricity prices and grocery bills eating into pay packets. When that inflation moderates, real wages are expected to start growing again in 2024. Speaker, as we were finalising this budget, floods were once again tragically taking lives, wrecking homes, shutting businesses, disrupting livelihoods and pushing up the cost of living. Once again, we are reminded of the solidarity that living on this harsh land demands of our people and of our communities. It speaks to a unique Australian way of responding to adversity, looking out for each other and looking after each other and lifting each other up. These are human tragedies first and foremost that come with broader consequences for the economy and for the budget. The government has acted quickly to make disaster assistance payments available. $3 billion has been provisioned as a response to recent floods. We will fund Disaster Relief Australia to help deploy more than 5,000 extra volunteers when future disasters strike. And this budget also invests up to $200 million a year in disaster prevention and resilience through the Disaster Ready Fund. In times like this, our government will always step up and do the right thing, standing with communities through the crisis and through the recovery. Speaker, Australians know that a complex combination of challenges at home and abroad is pushing up the cost of living. They know that governments can't make inflation disappear overnight. And they don't need us taking steps that would just make the problem worse by putting even more pressure on prices and making the independent Reserve Bank's job even harder. Instead, they need us to be responsible, reasonable and targeted, with policies that are affordable, fair and future-focused, delivering a long-term economic dividend. And that's what this budget does, with a 5-point plan for cost of living relief. Cheaper childcare, expanding paid parental leave, cheaper medicines, more affordable housing and getting wages moving again. This is a $7.5 billion package that helps put some money back in people's pockets, boosts productivity and grows the economy. But it's carefully targeted and carefully timed so that it avoids placing additional pressure on inflation. Speaker, from July next year, early childhood education and care will be more affordable for more than 1.2 million eligible Australian families who will benefit from higher subsidies. Yeah. Cheaper childcare is a game-changing investment in families, in our workforce and in our economy. It will increase the paid hours worked by women with young children by up to 1.4 million hours a week in the first year alone. That's the equivalent of 37,000 extra full-time workers. And because our early childhood educators guide our young ones and help them grow in these critical early years for the best possible start in life, it's much more than care. And it's also cost of living relief with an economic dividend. And that's what paid parental leave is as well. Tonight, our Labor government delivers the biggest expansion of paid parental leave since its creation. Yeah. This budget invests more than $530 million to progressively scale up the scheme, reaching 6 months paid leave in 2026. For two-parent families, a portion of this leave will be reserved for each parent to encourage families to share caring responsibilities. Again, this goes beyond taking a bit of pressure off household budgets. This is about greater equality and greater security for Australian women and more dads doing their bit. It's about participation and productivity, and that's what makes it economic reform as well. Speaker, this budget also makes medicines cheaper by slashing the PBS maximum general co-payment to $30 a script from the 1st of January next year, saving up to $12.50 per script for about 3.6 million Australians every year. And the budget does more to confront Australia's housing problem. Rents are through the roof and many families are struggling to keep up. Supply hasn't kept up with demand, which means too many struggle to live close to where they work. Too many are stuck on waiting lists for social housing. And for too many, the great Australian dream of home ownership seems completely out of reach. Our country can do better than that, and our government will. With the Housing Australia Future Fund building 30,000 new social and affordable homes in its first 5 years, and the National Housing Infrastructure Facility supporting an additional 5,500 new homes. With the Help to Buy scheme allowing up to 40,000 Australians to own their own home with a lower deposit and a smaller mortgage. With the regional first home buyer guarantee supporting another 10,000 new homeowners each year. And by helping more Australians downsize to a suitable home, which will free up housing stock for younger families. But tonight, Speaker, we go further and we do more. I am proud to announce that we have just struck a new national housing accord between governments, investors and industry to build the affordable homes that our country desperately needs and to help tackle our housing crisis. The ambition of this accord is big and it's bold. It's an aspiration to build 1 million new, well-located homes over 5 years from 2024. Most of this supply needs to come from the market, not the government, but there's a role for government, and we intend to play a leading role by coordinating and kickstarting the investment that we know needs to happen. To get the accord started, this budget commits an additional $350 million in funding for another 10,000 new affordable homes on top of our existing commitments. This will be delivered through an ongoing funding stream to help cover the gap between market rents and subsidised rents, making more projects commercially viable. State and territory governments will build on our commitment with up to 10,000 new homes as well. That's up to 20,000 new affordable homes in total. Along with local governments, they will tackle supply problems caused by land release and zoning policies. Institutional investors, including super funds, have endorsed the accord and will work with us to leverage more investment that delivers for their investors and members' interests and for the national interest as well. And peak organisations for the construction sector support building these homes at a high energy efficiency rating and training more apprentices under an extended skills guarantee. Now, we don't pretend that this accord solves every issue, nor do we pretend we can solve this problem completely overnight. But this is a serious start, a serious agenda that will lead to more Australians knowing the security of a good job and decent housing. Speaker, if there's one fact that sums up nearly a decade of wasted opportunities and warped priorities, it's that real wages are lower today than they were 10 years ago. It will take time to turn this around, but Australians now know this. Deliberately keeping wages low is no longer federal government policy. Our new government has already acted to get wages moving again. First, for the lowest paid Australians, supporting a pay rise for about 2.7 million workers on the minimum and award wages. The majority of them are women. Next, by supporting a wage increase for aged care workers. Again, mostly women. Next, by making it easier to implement our agenda for a stronger and more resilient economy, by making it easier for parents to earn more with cheaper childcare, training more people for higher wage work, investing in the industries that create secure, well-paid jobs, and fixing the broken bargaining system. Because the hard truth, Speaker, is that our economy wasn't delivering like you needed it to, and it isn't as resilient as we need it to be for the challenges that we face together. Too much of our potential has been wasted, and the costs of that are clear, with falling real wages and flatlining productivity and widespread skills shortages, and too many Australians denied the opportunity of a better future. The Jobs and Skills Summit that we hosted with the Prime Minister was all about bringing people together to help reverse these trends, finding consensus on the challenges and common ground on the solutions. And we agreed there that full employment, productivity growth and equal opportunities for women should be core objectives of government policy. And we know the key to this is quality investments in the capacity of the Australian economy and the capabilities of the Australian people. So, Speaker, this budget builds a stronger economy, more resilient, more inclusive and more modern. And skills are absolutely central to this. In 2012, more than 57,000 Australians completed a trade apprenticeship. By 2021, that number had dropped by more than 20,000. So tonight we fund a better future for vocational education. Yeah. Together with the states and territories, we are making a $1 billion investment in fee-free TAFE and vocational education places, providing 180,000 places next year, the first stage in our plan for nearly 500,000 fee-free TAFE courses for Australians, learning skills for jobs in priority areas like the care sectors and the new university places over the next 2 years for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Yeah. Because no Australian should be denied by poverty, by postcode or by lack of privilege their chance at a better future. Yeah. Speaker, nothing speaks more to that future or to a more modern economy than cleaner, cheaper, more reliable energy. After nearly 10 frustrating years and more than 20 failed energy policies, Australia now has a government that understands the generational and economic imperative of acting on climate change, and a plan that provides stability to the energy grid and stability to investors. Our plan drives investment in renewable energy, which is cheaper energy, and delivers thousands of new jobs in the coming years, many of them in our regions, by leveraging our existing traditional strengths and creating Tasmania's Marinus Link project. And this budget begins to implement our Powering Australia plan with more than $800 million invested in cutting taxes on electric cars, building a national electric vehicle charging network and hydrogen refuelling stations on our highways, providing solar battery storage for up to 100,000 homes, and ensuring renters and apartment owners can benefit from cheaper energy as well. And Speaker, a better future for Australia must mean a future made in Australia. Yeah. No more sleepwalking while other advanced economies seize new opportunities. No more surrendering industries and jobs overseas. No more selling out our future by clinging to the past. Our $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund will help finance projects that expand our industrial base, diversify our economy, create sustainable, well-paid jobs and grow our regional centres. in clean energy manufacturing, in medical manufacturing, in new technologies, in agriculture and in critical minerals, so that we can be a country that makes things again, so that we can add more value to the things that we sell to the world, and so that every part of the country can have a stake in our Australian-made future. Speaker, this budget focuses on building what we need, protecting what's precious to us, and backing the people, sectors and communities strengthening our economy. It includes an investment pipeline of more than $120 billion in transport infrastructure over the next decade to get people and products moving faster, extending full fibre access to 1.5 million more homes and businesses, and improving mobile coverage in regional, remote and natural disaster-prone areas, supporting small business with new energy efficiency grants and extending tailored mental health and financial counselling programs. More funding and more staff to slash the visa backlog so employers can fill labour shortages. Protecting our farmers and primary producers by boosting our biosecurity defences. And safeguarding for future generations the unique and precious natural wonders of our continent with $1.8 billion for environmental and heritage protection, including an extra $204 million to accelerate the defence and restoration of our Great Barrier Reef. Speaker, while our economic policies put a premium on resilience, our fiscal strategy puts a premium on restraint. Now, this is important, to keep spending under control, to give ourselves a better buffer for any further downturns, and to make sure that we're not adding to inflation. Now, this budget makes hard decisions for hard times. New policies have been largely offset across this year and next to avoid adding to inflation when price pressures are most acute. And nearly all of the tax upgrades over the forward estimates have been returned to the budget, not spent. 99% returned to the budget over the next 2 years and 92% returned to the budget over the next 4 years. Now, as a result of this discipline, payments will fall in real terms over the next 2 years, and real spending growth over the forward estimates is flat, averaging just 0.3% a year. Speaker, Australians just don't have enough to show for $1 trillion of debt, and gross debt as a share of GDP at its highest level in more than 70 years. Now, our responsible decisions mean gross debt to GDP will be 37.3% in 22-23 and remain lower over the forward estimates compared to the pre-election forecasts. So that's less debt than our predecessors, less debt but with more to show for it. The deficit for 2022-23 is now forecast to be $36.9 billion, an improvement of $41.1 billion. But while the temporary revenue boosts we're getting from higher employment and higher commodity prices will fade and fall, the profound and permanent spending pressures on the budget are forecast to grow and grow. The budget that we inherited was stuck in a structural deficit. So our job in the short term is to limit growth in spending, especially while inflation is high, return as much of our revenue upgrades as we can to the bottom line, and focus new spending on investments that grow the capacity of the economy. And this budget does that. And in the longer term, there's a bigger job to do as well, to put the budget on a more sustainable path. But tonight we take the first step with a budget repair package that delivers $28.5 billion in improvements over the next 4 years. Now, this unwinds wasteful or unnecessary spending, redirects it towards higher quality investments and priorities, and improves the integrity and fairness of our tax system. Our spending audit has helped identify $22 billion in savings over the next 4 years. This includes our election commitment to reduce spending on external contractors, consultancies, advertising, travel and legal services, expecting to save the budget $3.6 billion. And this budget makes our tax system more sustainable by making sure multinationals pay a fairer share of tax in Australia, by extending successful tax compliance programs, and by giving the ATO the resources they need to crack down on tax dodging. Together, these initiatives save a further $4.7 billion over 4 years. Now, this is just the beginning of our budget repair work, and it's just the beginning of the conversation that we need to have as a country about our economic and fiscal challenges and about the choices that we need to make on what is affordable and what is fair, so we can pay to service the debt that was left to us when borrowing costs are the fastest growing budget pressure, rising at more than 14% a year over a decade, and so we can pay for the things that Australians value most. Speaker, our priorities speak to who we are as a country, how we care for each other and how we protect each other. We choose to pay for better hospitals and healthcare. This budget invests $6.1 billion in hospitals, in Medicare, in extending COVID-19 support and expanding access to healthcare in the suburbs and regions of our great country. We choose to pay for better aged care and better wages for those giving care. This budget invests more than $2.5 billion to put nurses back into nursing homes, improve the quality of food and respond to the recommendations of the Royal Commission. We choose dignity for Australians with a disability. This budget begins the task of repairing the NDIS and securing its future. And we choose to defend our nation against current and future threats. Our government will ensure the Australian Defence Force is well positioned to meet our security challenges over the next decade and beyond, with defence funding rising beyond 2% of GDP over the forward estimates. And after nearly a decade of neglect and disrespect, we are restoring our role as a diligent and dependable partner and friend to our Pacific neighbours for a stable, peaceful and more prosperous region. Speaker, in this budget, we're also funding a record investment of $1.7 billion over 6 years to end violence against women and children, investing $1.2 billion in practical measures to close the gap for First Nations people and communities and to begin preparations for a referendum on a voice to Parliament, allowing older Australians to keep more of their pension when they work, responding to the recommendations from the interim report of the Royal Commission into defence and veteran suicide, and investing in better support for the women and men who serve us, establishing the long overdue National Anti-Corruption Commission, and beginning a new discussion about measuring what matters, the strength of our economy and the well-being of our people. Speaker, Australians know that there are hard days to come and hard decisions to accompany them. And getting through this period stronger than we were before will rely on the very best aspects of our national character: our resilience, our pragmatism, our cooperation and our confidence, and above all else, our belief in each other. And it will rely on a government dedicated and determined to confront challenges ignored for too long and to seize the opportunities that won't wait for us any longer. This budget does more than end a wasted decade, a decade marked by energy chaos, a crisis in aged care, skills shortages and stagnant wages, and not enough to show for $1 trillion in debt. It does more than draw a line under the drift, decline and decay that defined it. It begins to put things right. It begins to build a better future that befits our people and the sacrifices that they make for each other. A future we can all have a stake in, all sharing in its success. A stronger, more resilient Australia with more opportunities for more people in more parts of our amazing country. I commend the budget and the bill to the House.
There you go, that was the federal budget being handed down there by Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Of course, that was his first federal budget, making a number of key significant announcements there. Thanks for staying with us. I am Leonardo Puglisi. We're going to bring in now Stuart Jeffrey in just a second, actually. He is, of course, our Six News contributor, host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill here on Six News. I'll get him in just a moment. But we did hear a number of big announcements there from the Treasurer. We want to kind of go through them with you here because there was a lot to unpack in that just half an hour or so that we heard him there for. We do have a poll, though, in our live chat right now. So if you want to answer that, go ahead. We're asking you, are you happy with the federal budget? Vote now. Of course, leave your views in the live chat right now. But Stuart Jeffrey is with us now. Stuart, I presume you're watching that. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, look, I think it was very interesting. I've been going in the back and I've been going over some of the budget documents we have right now. And from what I'm seeing, the government's focus right now is on managing the current inflation rate. According to the promises of the government, they're going to get that down to below 4%, and then we're looking at seeing real wage growth increase at the end of next calendar year, so early financial year.
Anything surprising for you there?
Not really. I'm not surprised to see that the government has kept their policy of negative gearing. Some people suggested that they might change it because, of course, Labor has historically been opposed to negative gearing. However, they changed that policy last year. And from what we're seeing, it appears that they're going to keep that commitment to capital gains taxes and also to negative gearing.
And, of course, I think the other thing is the big thing that we heard some people say that they'd do a last-minute turnaround on, but they didn't. A job seeker increase. That's not part of this. Do you reckon... How do you reckon people will be calling for a job seeker increase? Those who are really passionate about it. How do you reckon they might be feeling right now about that?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty sure there are going to be a lot of angry Labor voters not hearing that hearing about this job seeker not increasing. On the other hand, the raise to the minimum wage is definitely a commitment to their promises. So you win some, you lose some, it seems like. So there's definitely some big highs for the government, but they've also decided to not go ahead with some of those policies as well, to point it out.
I was just going to say before I bring in Roman, I mean, I wasn't surprised that because I thought, no, it's just they're not going to do it, regardless of what people are saying. Oh, they'll make this last minute thing, but no, it seemed unlikely from the beginning there. But Stuart, thank you. We'll stay with you. But we want to now bring in, hoping he's here on the call, not Stuart. We've got Stuart. Political editor Roman McKinnon. Roman, good evening to you once again. What are some of the key takeaways for you from that? And I presume you're watching some of it, or at least checking your news notifications from those who were.
Yeah, definitely kind of what we expected to make life easier for those ordinary Australians, to provide cost of living relief. Exactly what it was. Was there any real surprises? I don't think so. Treasurer Jim Chalmers also said that the inflation was going to hit 7.75% by the end of the year. So that's an interesting figure there. He also mentioned the 5-point plan for cheaper childcare, expanding paid parental leave by 6 months, affordable medicines, more affordable housing, and have wages moving again. Also, Anthony Albanese also tweeted something saying as well in the budget that they would have fee-free TAFE places, more university places, and more apprenticeships. So that's quite interesting as well, to really get those jobs and skills going.
Yeah. We've got our poll again. I'll remind our viewers in the live chat right now. Are you happy with the federal budget? As we go to air right now, 38% say yes, 19% say no, 44% say not sure, 0% say show me the results. So that is the result. You can, as we speak right now, vote in that poll. And, of course, just leave your questions in the live chat in the comments section. We will read them out. We really want to hear what you think about this. Speaking of hearing what people want to say about this, the Greens actually touched on it very briefly, but Jim Chalmers seemed to cut me off. The Greens have released a statement on this. They said that, quote, the October budget does not deliver the change millions of Australians voted for at the last election, instead recommitting to tax cuts for billionaires and the wealthy while choosing to make difficult decisions that will fail everyone struggling to pay their bills. Adam Bands goes on to say that people voted for change at the last election, but this budget will keep them waiting. Labor's budget gives Clive Palmer a $9,000 a year tax cut, while delaying cost of living relief for everyday people. Labor had a choice: tax cuts for the wealthy or immediate cost of living relief through free dental and Medicare, mental health in Medicare, increasing income support and freezing rents. They chose tax cuts for the wealthy. That is the Greens there. Stuart, I wouldn't expect any different statement from the Greens there. What about you? What do you make of that? It seemed, because Labor didn't seem to be going away with those stage 3 tax cuts, and the Greens aren't happy. So it seemed like the kind of statement you'd expect.
Yeah, I expect the Greens to say basically the exact same thing. Having looked at their policies over the last few days that they've been talking about, they definitely do seem to be opposed to the majority of this budget, although they do appreciate some of the measures coming forward. I just want to revisit that point that Roman pointed out about the TAFE and university places. The figures are 180,000 TAFE places next calendar year, 480,000 TAFE places in the next 4 years, and 20,000 more university places.
Want to read out your live comments as they come in right now, because as always, we'd love to hear your feedback. Sly Finkley, I'm really going to try not to mispronounce names after the whole Weil and White thing. Wish they announced NBN as an essential service at low bandwidth, free for everyone. I'm stuffing up already. I think, by the way, if you've noticed, we've got NBN here at 6 News, which is why some of that feed was so choppy. SD Pear Shape says a pretty good budget, all things considered. Obviously, it's a very difficult position to be in. Of course, we had that early budget this year, but a lot has changed even in the space of a few months there. Now says the wealthy white. Wouldn't be too surprised if they said that. Yeah, I mean, it took a few seconds for me to pick up on that mistake. Gold OK says, what are your thoughts on Mr. Moon? Because me personally, I dislike him. He blocked my train station. I wish my internet was fast. I presume he's talking about Lucas Moon there, Liberal candidate for the seat of Richmond in the Victorian election. I don't know, but you can check out their interview with him right now. But returning to federal politics right now, guys, Roman, there's going to be a lot of reaction to this in the morning right now. Do you expect the coalition to say anything? Because I think most people will just say, they're just going to oppose it. They're just going to say, no, we don't like it. But what do you reckon? I'm sure we'll be actually hearing from them on social media now and probably on Breakfast TV tomorrow morning.
I think definitely. I think we'll hear something from the coalition, whether that be a statement or an interview. Would they be opposed to it? Obviously, it's their job to sort of, well, not their job, but their role to sort of go against most things that the government say. So, but would that be a bad look on them, saying we're going to help out families but not like if they backflip on that? That's what I'm trying to say. Would it be a really good look on them, or would they support it? So it's quite interesting. How could you approach it from a coalition's perspective? Obviously, it was Jim Chalmers first, and I thought he did a really good job of presenting himself like that. But yeah,
wasn't too nervous as we thought he might have been. He seemed like he'd been practicing it in the mirror for days. But that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. Stuart, I'll ask you the same question. How do you think the coalition's going to respond to this right now? I'm not sure if you've sent any statements from them. I certainly haven't. I'm not on Twitter right now, which is a rare thing for me. So what do you reckon the coalition, maybe some of the crossbenchers other than the Greens, the Teal Independents, Senator David Pocock, what do you reckon we're going to hear from them in the next coming hours and tomorrow?
Yeah, look, I definitely think we're going to see enough support to get the bill passed. Of course, it is the budget, so that tends to get passed pretty easily. Of course, the coalition are going to have some things to criticise, just as the Greens did. But I do want to point out one thing I did notice is that Labor has said that the defence spending will go over 2% of the GDP. So that 2% over the GDP seems to be on par with what the coalition did while they were in government with regards to defence spending and contracts with the US government, also the UK. So it seems to be definitely being a bipartisan support when it comes to defence and concern over China. So I definitely think you're going to see the coalition agreeing with Labor on that part of the budget at least.
Yeah, keep your questions coming in the live chat right now. We'll continue to read them out. Tim Walsh says, I think Labor should have gone harder, 2 years away from the next election. Yeah, 3-ish, it's what, October now, late October, so what, we'd have one in May 2025. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and in terms of, well, I'll actually ask you to this, Stuart, when do you think we're going to have the next budget? Early next year, is it usually like May-ish, or maybe they're going to push it to July-ish, because we've had this late one?
I think we still will see it at the usual time next year, so March. Nothing later than April, but I definitely reckon it'll be about the same time. Of course, the budget this year given by the coalition was kind of based around the election. So, of course, the Labor's got a bit more freedom there as to when exactly they have the budget. But I don't think you're going to see, definitely not going to see it in July, of course, because if it's in July, then you're going to really be pushing it back further and further. So I reckon we will still see it at roughly the same time. That way to keep in the same rhythm.
Again, with your comments in the live chat, Cool Hand Luke says we need people getting proper work hours and we need to circulate more money in our economy. Permanent jobs are something of the past, and what happened to penalty rates. He also adds there is no NDIS for other community sectors. How about funding them too? Opinionated organism says I'm disappointed there is no dental in Medicare. Oh gosh. Thank you, opinionated organism. He's disappointed there is no dental in Medicare. Thank you for that. Keep your questions coming in through the live chat right now. We'll wrap up our coverage in about 5 minutes right now. But Stuart, just quickly, I'll get to Roman again in a second. But Stuart, any final thoughts on this in terms of reaction, what the government's going to do, and just kind of your overall thoughts on it? Because it, obviously is the second budget this year. In a way, they're almost competing with the early one from the coalition, but they've come in. Jim Chalmers first, Labor's first since 2013. It was a big thing to deliver.
Yes, look, definitely they've tried to pitch it as being a budget to repair the economy, but I think the repair is definitely a more delicate job, definitely not taking a sledgehammer to the budget so far, because, we are pushing it back quite late, so I didn't expect to see many changes to the policies already being announced, and that seems to be about on par here, as Roman said. Of course, I reckon we could see more changes next year, but definitely given how late it is, it's basically just on par with what I expected.
Yeah. Roman, I'll ask the same question to you. Any final thoughts on this and kind of the reaction we're going to see coming through?
I think it'll kind of be steady reaction. It's kind of, but how many people watch the budget? So how many people will know tonight? Will they know via their news source in the morning?
Hopefully, Six News is their news source.
I think it'll start to be steady. Yeah, that's where I was going. So just to recap a little bit, so there'll be a plan for cheaper childcare, a plan to fix the aged care crisis, $126 million in government spending, and $845 million into an aged care COVID-19 package, $808 into a COVID-19 hospital package, a disaster fund of $30 million. So big spending by Labor. So I think we can see some reaction continuing into the night and on to tomorrow.
Political editor Roman McKinnon, 6 News contributor Stuart Jeffrey. Thanks both for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is 6 News' Budget 2022 2.0 special for this Tuesday evening. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let me also remind you that you can help support our work on Patreon for just $4 a month, patreon.com/SIXNewsAU. And of course, Spin Check Live will be back this Thursday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, more on the budget and also the Victorian election. We'll be speaking to, hopefully, 2 candidates, pending technical issues, but we'll see how that goes. I'm Leonardo Puglisi on behalf of Roman, Stuart, and the whole 6 News team. Thank you very much for tuning in. You've been watching 6 News. Stay with us through the night on social media and on our website, 6newsau.com for more coverage. For now, though, have a good night.